They think she just walked away and healed. But what they don't see is how she broke in silence, how she stood in front of her mirror, stripped of the love she once gave so freely, asking herself if she was ever truly seen. They don't see how your absence didn't just hurt her, it undressed her soul. And that's where her transformation began. There's a moment that happens in silence, not in a fight, not in a dramatic goodbye, but in that space where your footsteps echo as you leave. She won't scream, she won't run after you, but something inside her begins to unravel. See, when a man leaves, physically, emotionally, or energetically, many women don't just move on, they process, they feel, they reflect, they question, and in that process, they begin to emotionally undress. Yeah, not in front of you, but alone, where no one can see. She takes off the confidence she wore when she believed in your words. She peels off the laughter she once wrapped around your conversations. She loosens the grip on the promises you made. And one by one, she lays bare the layers she built with you. This is not weakness. This is how she heals. This is how she transforms pain into wisdom. Because you weren't just someone she liked. You were someone she envisioned a future with. So your absence doesn't just leave space. It echoes. It echoes through her memories, through her mornings, through the routines that once had your name on them. She remembers the way you spoke to her in your softer moments, the way her body melted in your presence, the way her voice changed when she felt safe with you. That goes deeper than you know. When you walked away, she started to question parts of herself. Was she not enough? Did she say too much? Did she love too hard or not enough? You see, the thing about a woman is she won't always show how deeply your absence hits. She'll get dressed, do her hair, go to work, smile. But beneath that strength, there's a silent undoing, because the ones who feel the most often say the least. But here's the thing, what feels like destruction at first becomes rebirth. She learns to dress herself in new truths. She adorns her soul with self-worth. And one day she realizes she never needed someone to complete her, only to complement her. So yes, your absence hit deep. Not because she couldn't live without you, but because she gave you access to a version of herself few ever get to see. And that's what makes her powerful. That's what makes her unforgettable. That's why walking away doesn't mean she's lost. It means she's remembering who she is. Without the weight of someone who couldn't stay, there's a moment that happens in silence. It's not dramatic. It's not filled with shouting or tears. It's subtle. It's the quiet shift in energy when someone leaves, not just physically, but emotionally. And in that silence, something inside her begins to change. It's not always visible to the outside world. It doesn't show up in her outfit or the way she wears her hair. It begins internally, like a quiet storm that builds in waves. She doesn't run after him. She doesn't beg. She doesn't fall apart in public. But in private, she begins to unravel in ways that words can't capture. It's not about weakness. It's not about desperation. It's about vulnerability and the space she once reserved for him. That space doesn't disappear when he walks away. It opens up, and in that opening, she's left with echoes. Echoes of conversations, shared moments, inside jokes, and the way her body used to relax when he entered the room. She starts to emotionally undress, not in the way most people think. This isn't seductive. It's raw. It's unguarded. It's deeply human. She takes off the shield she wore to protect herself. She removes the confidence she had when she believed she was chosen. She unbuttons the trust she built, piece by piece. And then she's left standing in front of the mirror, not naked, but exposed. She sees herself not just as who she is now, but as who she tried to be for him. The version of her that adapted, softened, compromised, held back, or leaned in too far. And in that space, a flood of questions rise. Was I too much? Was I not enough? Did I love the right way? Did I make it too easy for him to leave? She doesn't always talk about this part, because the world expects women to be strong, to bounce back, to glow up. But the emotional undressing, that's not for the world to see. It's quiet. It's done at night when no one's watching. It's done through text she types but never sends, through memories she tries to push away but finds on repeat in her mind, through the perfume she avoids wearing because it reminds her of the time he kissed her neck and said he'd never leave. And as she emotionally strips down, she's not falling apart. She's facing herself. She's shedding the pieces that no longer belong. She's peeling back the assumptions, the fantasies, the hopes. She's looking straight at the truth, not the one she imagined, but the one that remains when he's no longer there. There is something deeply sacred about a woman in this state, a woman who is no longer hiding from her pain, a woman who is willing to sit with her wounds instead of covering them, a woman who no longer needs to perform strength but chooses to feel instead. That is where the transformation begins. Not in the rebound, not in the revenge, not in the distraction, but in the stillness. In that moment where she decides to stop asking why he left and begins asking why she stayed, why she gave so much, why she ignored the red flags, why she convinced herself it was love when it was only attention. That reflection isn't easy. It's confronting. It's uncomfortable. But it's honest. And that honesty begins to sew her back together. Not quickly, not perfectly, but deeply. Because while his absence hurt, it also gave her something valuable. It gave her the chance to see her own depth, to feel her own heart, to learn the strength it takes to face emptiness and not run from it. It revealed to her the weight of her own emotional offering, the beauty in how much she's capable of loving, the reality that not everyone is ready to receive a love that real. So she begins to reclaim her layers. Slowly, she picks up her self-worth and puts it back on like armor. She reaches for her voice and wears it with pride. She dresses her soul in clarity and her heart in discernment. And with each step, she becomes more herself than she's ever been. There's a kind of power women carry that's rarely spoken about. It's the power of presence, the silent pull of emotional intimacy, the way her energy fills a room without her needing to say a word. When she gives herself to someone emotionally, she's not giving a surface-level version of herself. She's opening the door to a world most people never get to see. Her presence becomes a safe space. Her voice becomes a comfort. Her touch becomes home. And so when she invests in someone, she's not doing it halfway. She's building a bridge. She's inviting him in. She's letting him see the sides of her she usually protects, not because she's weak, but because she believes in connection, because she hopes that vulnerability will be met with presence. Because when a woman loves, she does so in layers, quietly, completely, and often courageously. But here's what most people don't realize. When that presence is taken for granted, or worse, when it's dismissed or walked away from, something shifts. Not just on the outside, but within her very core. She may not say anything. She might not even let him know the damage was done. But in that silence, she's recalibrating. She's withdrawing her warmth. She's evaluating everything she gave. And somewhere deep inside, she's starting to pull back the light she once poured into the connection. Because for her, it was never casual. She doesn't love in halves. She doesn't engage with someone unless she feels a resonance, a reason, a rhythm that speaks to her soul. That's why when he leaves, physically or emotionally, there's a noticeable emptiness. Not just for him, but for her too. In those moments after he's gone, she starts to remember the way she used to feel before she met him, the gold she had, the self-trust she carried, the peace she knew in solitude. It's not that she was dependent on him. It's that she had made space for someone who didn't know how sacred that space really was. And now she sits with that vacancy. She sits with her own silence. And in that stillness, she doesn't just mourn the loss of someone she cared for. She mourns the parts of herself that were temporarily quieted in order to make that relationship work. The dreams she paused, the boundaries she softened, the voice she sometimes silenced to keep the peace. This is where her emotional power begins to reawaken. She starts to realize that just because someone couldn't recognize her depth doesn't mean that depth isn't valuable. She begins to see that her ability to love deeply isn't a flaw. It's a superpower, one that not everyone is prepared for. And as she pulls back the energy she once gave freely, she starts to feel whole again. Not in a rush, not with resentment, but with a quiet, steady rebuilding of her inner foundation. Her absence becomes louder than her presence ever was. Her silence begins to speak volumes. And that's when the real shift happens. Because when a woman takes her power back, not in anger, but in clarity, everything around her changes. She moves differently, speaks with more intention, laughs with more ease, chooses more carefully. Her standards become rooted not in pain, but in truth, not in fear, but in worth. And suddenly the things that used to attract her no longer hold her attention. The patterns that once pulled her in lose their grip. She's not waiting for someone to return. She's not hoping to be chosen. She is choosing herself every single time. Because once she remembers who she is, who she was before she opened her heart, she doesn't go back. She doesn't chase. She doesn't question her value. She simply continues, stronger, softer, wiser. And those who once thought they could come and go as they pleased begin to feel the weight of her absence. Because when she gave, it was real. And when she walks away, what they lose can't be replaced. There's something hauntingly beautiful about the way a woman processes emotional pain. It's not loud. It's not always visible, but it's real. When someone she's emotionally invested in walks away, it doesn't just leave a void. It triggers a quiet unraveling. Not because she's weak, not because she needs someone to complete her, but because she allowed herself to believe in a connection. She allowed herself to open her heart, to share her softness, to trust. And when that trust is broken or abandoned, she doesn't just move on like nothing happened. She absorbs the silence. She examines the cracks. She replays the moments. She starts to undress herself emotionally, not for attention, but for understanding. Each layer she peels back reveals a truth she hadn't fully looked at before. She begins to notice the little ways she adjusted, the things she overlooked, the instincts she silenced. Not to blame herself, but to confront the choices she made while in the space of love. Because for her, love isn't a casual game. It's not just about chemistry or convenience, it's sacred. It's intentional, and when someone walks away from that sacred space, they don't just leave her behind. They leave behind a version of her that was deeply committed to giving something rare. That's why her healing isn't quick. It's layered. It's deep. It's personal. She may seem fine on the surface. She may go about her day, smile in public, do her work, meet with friends. But in the quiet moments, she's reassembling her heart. And that's the part most people don't see. They don't see the inner work. They don't see the emotional reconstruction. They don't see how much she's grown simply by choosing not to run from the pain. Because when someone you care about leaves, it doesn't just challenge your trust in them, it challenges your trust in yourself. She starts to wonder if her intuition failed her, if her heart got ahead of her head, if the love she gave was too much. But instead of drowning in those thoughts, she learns to breathe through them, slowly, patiently. She learns to sit in the discomfort. She learns to honor the parts of herself that feel broken without trying to glue them back together too quickly. This is her becoming, her shedding, her reclaiming. She begins to notice the difference between emotional availability and emotional presence, between attention and intention, between being wanted and being valued. And suddenly, the person who walked away starts to look less like a loss and more like a lesson, not a punishment, not a mistake, but a necessary part of her path. Because through the pain, she discovers the edges of her strength. Through the silence, she hears the voice of her own wisdom, and through the void, she finds the fullness of her own identity. There's a subtle elegance in the way she rises, not dramatically, not for show, but through consistency, through choosing herself every single day. She may miss what once was, she may grieve the future she imagined, but she no longer clings to a version of love that required her to dim her light. She reclaims her energy. She redirects her care. She pours into herself the love she once extended outward. And that creates a shift in her spirit, a shift that others can feel, a shift that makes her more grounded, more selective, more in tune with her truth. She stops needing closure from someone else because she creates it from within. She stops romanticizing potential and starts honoring alignment. She stops waiting to be seen and starts standing in full view of herself. And even though she once felt the sting of being left behind, she now walks forward not with bitterness, but with deeper clarity about what she deserves. There's a moment after it all ends where everything feels suspended. She stands still in a world that keeps moving. People pass by, the days go on, but something within her pauses, not because she can't move on, but because she needs to understand what just happened. She doesn't cry in front of everyone. She doesn't perform her pain, but inside a quiet process begins, one where she begins to peel away the moments, the words, the silences, trying to make sense of what she just survived. When she gave her heart, it wasn't an experiment. It wasn't just to fill time. It was intentional. Even if she had doubts, she still chose to see the good. She still leaned in, and when that ends, whether by distance, silence, or a clear goodbye, she doesn't just lose the person, she loses the emotional rhythm she built around them. She begins to revisit moments not to torture herself, but to seek the lesson. What did she ignore? Where did she give too much? Where did she silence herself to maintain peace? These aren't easy questions. They don't come with quick answers, but they're necessary. Because the love she gave wasn't light. It came with depth. It came with vulnerability. It came with faith in something shared. And now that it's gone, She starts to evaluate her choices, not out of regret, but out of a desire to understand. She's not looking to place blame, she's searching for her center again. The center that was shifted when she gave someone else space within her emotional world. There's a common belief that when someone leaves, we should instantly be better off, that healing is linear, that if she truly loved herself, she'd simply rise and walk away untouched. But real healing doesn't happen that way, especially for someone who feels deeply. She doesn't rush through the process. She sits with it. She honors it. She allows herself to acknowledge that something real was lost, even if it wasn't meant to last. That's the emotional maturity people rarely see. The strength in not pretending, the power in sitting with the pain without letting it define her. Over time, the fog lifts, her thoughts become clearer, her energy begins to shift. She starts to recognize patterns that once felt like comfort, but were actually rooted in survival. She remembers how she used to feel before she was entangled in uncertainty. She reconnects with the version of herself who didn't question her worth based on someone's ability to stay. Slowly, she begins to take her power back, not by becoming hard, not by playing games, but by becoming more rooted in her truth. She sets new standards, not to punish, but to protect. She doesn't romanticize inconsistency anymore. She doesn't chase clarity from those who thrive in confusion. Her heart still feels, but now with wisdom. There's something magnetic about a woman who has loved deeply, been hurt, and still chooses to believe in love, but only the kind that mirrors her growth. She stops seeking validation from someone else's recognition and begins to reflect it inward. She dresses herself in self-respect. She speaks with clarity, not confusion. She no longer lets chemistry override consistency, and in that, her energy becomes unmistakable. It's not desperate, it's not waiting, it's certain. The kind of certainty that comes from having walked through emotional fire and not lost herself in the ashes. When others see her now, they may think she's always been this composed, this grounded, this clear, but what they don't see is the emotional shedding it took to get here. The nights of silence, the internal battles, the courage it took to stop blaming herself for someone else's inability to choose her fully. They don't see the quiet decisions she made to no longer be accessible to anything that didn't honor her spirit. They see the result, but they don't see the rebuilding, the soul work, the resilience formed in solitude, the emotional undressing that allowed her to find herself underneath everything she thought she had to be for someone else. So when you see her now, calm, radiant, unapologetically herself, know that it wasn't easy. She didn't just move on, she moved through the heartbreak, through the silence, through the unraveling of who she thought she had to be, and now she stands in her truth. Not because she was never broken, but because she had the strength to put herself back together in a way that no one can ever undo again.